Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody to support us if you have a chance or if you can. Even $1 helps, and we have a link in the description to a website called Buy Me a Coffee. It's just a way to donate to us and support us. Again, any amount is helpful so that we can keep putting out content. And there's also other ways for you to support us in the show notes to this podcast or on YouTube in the description. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about KPMG and a couple other stories. First up, let's talk about KPMG. There's news out of the UK, a lot of news coming out of the UK that KPMG is going to be getting some extra time off after COVID. Remember, KPMG did a survey where they asked people where they want to work. And then it was a big shocker when people came back and they said that, yeah, we want to work from home forever. Well, KPMG is trying to make that come true. Employees will only have to work an average of 2 days a week from the office or a client site. And they're calling it, depending on the news story, 4 days in a fortnight. So I guess, I don't know. I don't know what that means, but it's basically 2 days a week, depending on the news story. And then you'll also be given an extra 2.5 hours off each week. And then they only have to work 35 hours a week. I don't know how this is going to work. But John Holt, who is the CEO who we mentioned, KPMG in UK, he had the following to say: "We trust our people. Our new way of working will empower them and enable them to design their own working week. The pandemic has proven it's not about where you work, but how you work." I'm not sure why he has to come out with that quote, but I mean, you know, the Big Four accounting firms, they always have to signal. And I mean, there was a news story about him, about how he deserved that position because he was the complete opposite of Bill Michael. As you remember, Bill Michael told people to quit moaning about working from home. And they said, well, John Holt, he's a good guy. He was the lead of the audit practice. He's quiet and he's political and he does what was needed. But that's not really, I'm not really sure that going the complete opposite of somebody that's outgoing is the way to go when you're dealing with a ton of regulation, when you're dealing with morale problems, bullying stories. You need somebody that's going to be a leader. And I think the time off will help, but it's still the Big Four accounting firms, so I'm not really sure how this will work. The Big Four accounting firms do this every year. I feel like during the summer where they give people a day off. Big Four accounting firms have always been that way, where you always get time off, but it's all dependent on how much you work and how hard you work and getting your work done. And also if you've made the right political moves to get a good rating at the end of the year. And that's what people are taking for granted. It's still going to be competitive. You're still going to have to do better than other people. You can't just sit back at home and expect to outperform everybody. You're going to have to set bigger expectations. You're going to have to figure out how to maneuver, because it used to be, if you were in the office, you could spend a little bit more face time. If you're at a client site, you could be face to face with the client. And that was like a really big advantage, because there were some people that just were too afraid of the client. They would just be ticking and tying. And it was a little bit harder to avoid the client if you're at the client site. I mean, it's harder to avoid them without it being obvious to your team and affecting your performance. Well, now that'll be easier. And it's going to be harder to interact with the client because you're remote. The client is remote. The client was already hesitant to talk to the Big Four accounting firms. And now with this remote, it's just going to get worse, but that's just a downside. So that was just some news about KPMG. There's a couple other news stories about the dream career. That's what I'll call it, because a lot of people that go into the Big Four accounting firms, they have this really convoluted path of, I'm going to be an associate in audit, move up, then I'm going to leave to industry and become a CFO and then a CEO. Well, for all of you that dream that way, there's two stories that came true today or this week. There's a guy named Mark McCaffrey, who used to be a partner at PwC. He was at PwC for 20 years, or partner at PwC for 20 years. And now he's going to be the CFO at Godaddy, the web hosting and domain service company, if you know them. and they're multi-billion-dollar company. He's going to be the CFO, and I think that says a lot. It says a lot because a lot of people want to go that path. But being a partner at PwC, and he ran the firm's technology, media, and telecom sector for audit, so he was making good money there. But there's just so much more money that you can make at a public company, especially if they give you equity, or you can leverage that to even a bigger role. And maybe the story we're about to talk about can highlight how big of a role you can get. So there's another story today that was big for multiple reasons. There was a CFO that worked at the largest hedge fund in the world, which is Bridgewater Associates. And he went to a crypto firm. He went to NYDIG, which is a firm that specializes in coming up with use cases for Bitcoin and helping people invest in it. Not people, but like larger companies invest in it, and then the little ways to use it. And we speak a lot about crypto on here and all the ways the big four accounting firms advise people. So that's what he's doing. He's leaving a job as a CFO at the biggest investment company to work at a crypto firm. And this says a lot of things. That crypto is growing really big, and that also working at the big four accounting firms can also be very important, because he worked at E&Y for 5 years, and he worked in South Africa, and he left as a senior manager. So he did what this other guy is probably trying to do, get one CFO gig and then leverage that into a more lucrative opportunity. But this also speaks to just cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in general. And we've been talking about the big four accounting firms getting involved in crypto, and now we have a huge CFO leaving for an opportunity at a crypto firm. These are basically the hedge funds of the future. And we talked about, you can check out a podcast that we did about KPMG, and they partnered with Coinmetrics to come up with a service offering. So the big four accounting firms are getting into crypto. Accounting professionals overall and finance professionals overall are believing in crypto, as we see here. This guy left a great job that he had to go into a more speculative gig at a crypto firm. So it's just pretty interesting. And it also shows you how great of an opportunity the big four accounting firms can be to put that on your resume, but you have to still own your career and leverage that into a better position. But we saw today 2 big four people getting great jobs in industry, and it tells you that there's better opportunities out there in case you want to leave the big four accounting firms, or in case you can't get a job there. But if you do get a job there, you can leverage that into a good position. So that's the podcast for today. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast, stay up to date, support us financially through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description to this podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Big Four Accounting Firms. Thanks for listening.